Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, Today we'll cover chapter 10, is measuring exposure to exchange rate fluctuation. So we'll talk about three different types of exchange rate exposure and some like techniques on those categories. Let me share the screen. Okay. All right. One, two, yeah, that's and Kelsey. And, right. So, you know, uh, typically multinational corporations' position on exchange rate risk is, and absolute majority of the MNCs is that exchange rate risk is relevant. But some of the people, they say it might be irrelevant, assuming some situation, but I don't think that's the case. So, like overall conclusion is for absolute majority MNCs, um, the exchange rate risk is relevant, and they usually pay a lot of attention to this one, how to manage this exchange rate risk in their multinational like businesses. Okay. Now, Andrew, can you go over this?
Yeah.
Yeah, first
Many NCs attempt to stabilize their earnings with hedging strategies because they believe exchange rate risk is relevant. Because we manufacture and sell products in a number of countries throughout the world, we are exposed to the impact on revenues and expenses of movements in currency exchange rates. Forms of exchange rate exposure,
no,
transaction exposure. What? Oh.
The second part, increased volatility.
Increased volatility in foreign exchange rates may have an adverse impact on our business results and financial condition.
All right. Okay. So, naturally, the many multinational corporations, they attempt to stabilize their earnings with hedging strategies because they believe exchange rate risk is important and relevant, right? So just, a couple of examples of the corporate opinions on this exchange rate risk is as follows. Procter and Gamble, they have their businesses like internationally, like globally, international multinational corporation. They say because we manufacture and sell product in a number of countries throughout the world, we are exposed to the impact of revenues and expenses of movement in currency exchange rate. So that's the opinion by Procter and Gamble and PepsiCo. You know that company. They have their business in all over the world, and their opinion is increased volatility in foreign exchange rate may have an adverse impact on our business results and financial condition. See, those companies, uh, they understand the importance and relevance of exchange rate risk in their international business, their multinational business. So, uh, you know, they pay like big deal of attention to the management of this exchange rate risk. Okay, and the Eric, can you read the second part?
Sure.
Forms of exchange rate exposure, transaction exposure, sensitivity of the firm's contractual transactions in foreign currencies to exchange rate movements, economic exposure, sensitivity of the firm's cash flows to exchange rate movements, sometimes referred to as operating exposure, translation exposure, exposure of the MNC's consolidated financial statements to exchange rate fluctuations.
All right, thank you. So we have the three forms of exchange rate exposure. That include the transaction exposure and economic exposure, or it is called operating exposure, translational exposure. So we will cover this one in using some examples, still in abstract form. So transaction exposure is a sensitivity of the company's contractual transactions in foreign currencies to exchange rate movement. Sometimes for the same transactions, without any change, with little change, with no change, just simple like the exchange rate volatility may have impact on the cash flows and the profit significantly, sometimes. So that is about the transaction exposure. Economic exposure is a sensitivity of the company's cash flows to exchange rate movement, sometimes referred to as operating exposure. When the company calculate their cash flows, profits, that cash flow, the net cash flows to the company may change, it will change depending on the exchange rate movement, right? So depending on the exchange rate movement or the prediction, forecasting movement, the company's cash flows, the outcome, resulting cash flows will be quite different. You'll see that in our example there. Also, translational exposures. The multinational corporation, they have to report consolidate financial statement. But all those financial statements, you have to collect all the information from different international operations. So they have to convert like foreign currency statement into the US, the statement in US dollars. In that process, there is like exchange rate risk exposure there. Let's talk about transactional exposure. All right. All right. As we said, transaction exposure is about the sensitivity of the company's contractual transactions in foreign currencies to exchange rate. All right. Suppose we have like business. We import 1 million euros, some product, some textile with 1 million euros for 1 million euros. So the business itself is the same thing, but this 1 million euros will be translated into different amount of US dollars depending on the exchange rate. Right? As you see there, if it is $1 per euro, then the amount, like if you translate this one, if you convert this transaction into US dollars, then it will be $1 million. But if the exchange rate is like 1.5, 1.4 dollar per euro, then the outcome will be $1.4 million, right? Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed about this transaction. Okay, so we agreed. We have the contract to import 1 million euros, but for the two possible exchange rate, $1, 1.5, $1.4, the outcome, the amount of these companies, our companies, our payment in US dollar will be significantly different. One is $1 million, the other one is $1.4 million. That $400,000, that that Asian payment, that comes just simply from this exchange rate volatility, exchange rate change, right? So, all right, so let's talk about that. Was one simple example. I mean, for different exchange rate, the U.S. companies like payment in U.S. dollar will be different. If it is $1, pay just $1 million. If it is 1.1 or $10 per euro, then the U.S. company's payment is $1.1 million. So just because of change, I mean difference or change in exchange rate, there's a $100,000 additional cost, additional payment to the U.S. company. See, that's you cannot ignore that. That is not insignificant. Okay. All right, let's talk about this like one example. Calculate consolidated net cash flow assessment. Now, this company, our company, has a portfolio of 4 different countries, currencies. Right? So our cash flow should be explained in 4 different the currency exchange rate. First one, UK pound. Second one is Canadian dollar, and third one Swedish krona, and fourth is Mexican peso. So based on our calculation, suppose we have total inflows for the UK, so about 17 million UK pound inflows. Outflows is about like 7 million. So net cash inflows is UK pound, 10 million UK pound. Now Canadian dollar. The inflows 12 million and outflows is 2 million. So 10 million Canadian dollar, that's net cash inflows. Swedish krona, it's 20 million Swedish krona, that's the inflows, but 120 million cash outflows to Sweden. So net cash flow here is 100 million Swedish krona, right? And Mexican peso, 90 million inflows and 10 million outflows. So net cash flows in Mexican peso is 80 million Mexican peso. So we have the portfolio of cash flows in 4 different currencies now. Okay, now, so the company analyst, they did the case analysis for our potential exchange rate. So they come up with these 3 possible scenarios. So we will do the scenario analysis. Right? The first proposed scenario will be this: the UK pound 1.4 or $1.40, Canadian dollar 80 cents, and Swedish 15 cents, and Mexican peso 10 cents. So now given this exchange rate, projected exchange rate for case 1, let's convert all these cash flows into US dollars. How do you do that? It's simple. It's net cash flow and cash flow in UK pound times this projected exchange rate. So that's $14 million, right? And Canadian dollar, 10 million Canadian dollar, and propose the exchange rate is 80 cents. That one here, right? Cross Swedish krona, 100 million times, 15 cents there. And here, Mexican peso, 80 million times, 10 cents there. See, so using the exchange rate for the first case, our company's total cash flow, total net cash flows is $15 million. $15 million, right? By the way, Swedish krona is 15 cents. Okay. I visited like the Stockholm and Sweden in August, and at the time it was like about 10 cents or 9 cents, okay, 9 cents. So it is quite depreciated recently. And Norway krone was also depreciated about 10 cents. All right. So the second case, let's talk about second case. Let's calculate second case. Let's do the same thing there. So 10 million British pound times, and this one is now this time $1.50. Okay, this one is 10 million Canadian dollar and the 80 cents. And this one is same thing, 100 million krona and 15. And this one is Mexican peso, 80 million Mexican peso and cents. All right, so the second case of projected currency value based on that, what you see is the $16 million. $16 million. Now, the first scenario, first case is 15 million, and this one is 16 million. Now, the difference between these two, $1 million, is not small money. It's quite significant amount of money. That could happen. Depending on the currencies like change or volatility. You see that there is not small money. It is quite significant. Now, case number 3, we have the different third case and with different exchange rate. Let's calculate that. So 10 million British pound times and 1.60. And this one is 10 million Canadian dollar and 81 cents. Swedish krona, 100 million. There. And here, the 80 million Mexican peso and 11 cents there. Now look at this one. That one also, under the projected exchange rate for the case 3, we have $16.9 million. See, this also quite significant difference there. Okay, we just did like this scenario sensitivity analysis for 3 different scenarios there, and the amount net result is quite significant. So, MN's multinational corporation, they have to pay attention to this. Okay, now, so we talk about like a portfolio of foreign currency, right? In this case, 4 different foreign currencies there. Now, when you calculate the standard deviation is the measure of risk there, exchange rate risk. That's a very common measure, standard deviation. So you calculate standard deviation to get the insight about the currencies, currencies, okay, volatility, risk. Okay, so let me check. Chat. Let me. Tally here. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Good. Okay, now to calculate standard deviation, there are two ways. I mean, I calculate standard deviation for like more than one like currencies, like two currencies, three currencies. There are two ways. One is simple way is to use this spreadsheet. I'll show you that later. Spreadsheet. Or the other way is to calculate, to use this formula. This formula, we borrowed this formula from investment theory, right? Investment theory. If you happen to be in my investment class, investment management class, then you see this, you probably saw this one, right? In chapter 6. So this is the portfolio theory proposed by Harry Markowitz, right? So W is the weight proportion for each currency or each asset, each stock, and the standard deviation is the risk measure, and one more variable is correlation coefficient between two stock or two currencies. So this one is like theoretical formula, theoretical like equation to calculate portfolio currencies standard deviation. So I'm going to show you how to use this one later on. Now, transaction exposure, one of the measure, one of the measure that they use for to explain this transaction exposure is value at risk. Value at risk. So this one is one method to explain transaction exposure. This one is like potential maximum one-day loss on value, right? This way. So the formula is this one. Look at this one here. There are three inputs. One is expected percentage change in exchange rate. And then z-value 1.65 confidence level, right? Probably you remember this one from your statistics class. Confidence level z-value for 90%, like level of statements, confidence level, it is 1.65, right? 95, it should be 1.9 something. Okay, so typical, this is typical. Z value is 1.65 is typical for our purpose. We'll use this one, we'll stick to this one. And another input is standard deviation. Standard deviation of daily percentage change in the currency. We calculate your daily percentage change in the currency. Now, standard deviation is the risk and volatility measure. So, given these three variables, we could calculate this maximum one-day loss. Okay, so expected percentage change in the currency minus v value 1.65 times standard deviation. That will give you your maximum one-day loss. So we'll do this one in on this example. All right. So to use this approach on the spreadsheet, this is the steps. This is the steps there. All right. Callie, can you hear me? Callie? Right. Our internet connection is not good, probably. Jacob? Jacob? Jalen?
Yes.
Yeah, can you go over this four steps procedure?
All right, so one, obtain the series of exchange rates for all relevant dates for each currency of concern and list each currency in its own column. 2, compute the percentage changes per period for each exchange rate in a column. Estimate the standard deviation of the percent changes for the exchange rate. And 4, compute the periodic change or periodic percentage change in portfolio value by weighted average of the individual currency returns.
Okay, so this one process. The first one is like you just get the series of exchange rate. Here, like this, we have one the Swiss franc and Argentina peso. 2, we have the monthly series here, right? And then compute the percentage change per period for each exchange rate in a column. Let's do this. Percentage change for Swiss franc, you do this one, right? This one, 0.6 minus 0.60, 64 minus 0.60 divided by 0.60. That is the percentage change. You know that, right? Percentage change. And just do it. Let's do one more. Or this one minus this one divided by the initial value. That gives you your percentage change. So, and the rest is just copy and paste. See, easy, right? So these are all monthly percentage change in exchange rates. Now, the Argentina peso. Argentina peso is a 36 minus 35 divided by 35 initial value, and then copy and paste. See that? Simple. So we calculated percentage change in the monthly each period, percentage change in exchange rate. As we test the first one and second, we did that, right? Estimate the standard deviation of the percentage changes for each the exchange rate. Now, before we go that, let's calculate the average percentage change. And also for Argentina peso. Okay. You should see the average percentage change for Swiss franc is quite higher than this one, right? This in a standard deviation. Standard deviation is the risk limit. So what you do is just STD with standard deviation, right? You highlight this the Swiss franc. It is 5.57%. That's the standard deviation for Swiss franc. Let's copy and paste. See? Okay. 4.58%. That is the standard deviation for Argentina peso. 5.57%. It is Swiss franc. Okay. And the correlation. Let's calculate correlation. Correlation is this one, Swiss franc and Argentina peso. That's what you do. That's how you calculate your correlation between two series. So just close it and enter this one here. So minus 0.2326. That's a correlation coefficient, right? So if you are like in investment management class, or you already took investment management class, then probably you understand the meaning and importance of correlation coefficient. Now, in this case, the scenario is we have the portfolio of two currency, right? So one is Swiss franc and Argentine peso. If we include these two in a portfolio, um, okay, let me explain an easy way. Okay, if you invest like 2 or 3 or more, 5 or 10 stocks, 10 stocks. Yes. The reason why you want to go for portfolio, a group of stocks in your investment portfolio is to minimize or reduce your investment risk. I think you probably heard about this. Yeah, that don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you do that, when something hits, some shock hits your basket, you lose a lot of eggs, right? So instead of putting all your eggs in one basket, you put the eggs in different basket, multiple basket. Then when sharks come and hit your portfolio, you can save a lot of eggs there, right? Because it's safe. The risk is low. So, that is the idea of investment, right? That is the idea of investment here. So if you include the different stocks in your portfolio, that may have the possibility of minimizing or lowering your investment risk. Now, it's the same thing. For multiple currencies, if your company, multinational corporation, they are involved in a number of different currencies there, then they may have the effect of reducing risk volatility. All right. So now I use this example to show you the significance of the risk or like investment risk. This is a real story. One person who used to work in Enron Corporation, he loved his company like a lot, and he was so proud of his company. Uh, so he put all the Enron stocks in his retirement portfolio, right? So that company, Enron company, used to be strong, like utility energy companies in Texas. I had one in Texas, so it was quite like strong, dominant, like the energy like companies, energy trading. They do a lot of things. So when the company was going strong, and the stock price was very is was high and strong. So this person, that person, who was employed, was one of the Enron employees. He decided to put all 100% of the Enron stocks in his retirement fund, retirement account. So when things go well about the company, strong, his retirement account went over 500,000, right? 500,000. Over 500,000, you can safely, in Texas or there are southern areas, you can safely retire, right? Without any problem. Okay? But what he did was he put all Enron stocks in his retirement account. I think you hear when you hear that, you feel uncomfortable, right? That's natural. So he put all his eggs in one basket there, right? So when the company's like performance and good days, then he enjoyed art. Like he enjoyed like pretty good. But what happened? 2002, that Enron Corporation, they went bankrupt. There were a lot of like scandals, corruption, and fraud in that the company. I don't know what happened to that company, but they got involved in like big corruption and fraud. Yeah. So when that happened, they started to go down. Finally, they went bankrupt in 2002. So this employee, um, what he did was like he put all his eggs in one basket. That is a big violation. That's a really worst case of investment. Big violation of investment principle. Investment principle, simply put, is diversify, diversify, and diversify. That's the investment principle. He went completely against that. Okay? He violated that basic the investment rule and principle. Guess what happened? When the company was going down, used to be like over $500,000 or close to $500,000. Now he recovered only $1,100. Do you understand what that means? That is the worst cost. I mean, that's cost of worst investment decisions. This is totally against the investment principle, investment rule. So he kind of like putting all his eggs in one basket. He maximized his investment risk there. So when some shock hits his basket, he lost everything. He lost everything. He could only save like $1,100 out of $500,000. That is the one. That is the picture of the investment risk and the minimizing your investment risk by diversifying, diversifying, and diversifying. Okay, so that is why you have to invest in multiple stocks, multiple assets. In this case, multiple currencies. MNCs, they are involved in a multiple like international businesses, and therefore they are involved in multiple like foreign currencies. So that is like if you have like multiple currencies in their portfolio, there is kind of risk diversification. Risk diversification. All right. Now, when you talk about risk diversification, by including multiple currencies, multiple assets, multiple stocks, important measure for that risk management, risk reduction, or risk diversification, like risk diversification impact is correlation coefficient. Correlation coefficient. Now, another important rule for like risk diversification is this. If you include two different stocks, for example, let's think about two stocks. If you include two different stocks, if you want to increase, like improve your risk management, risk diversification, or risk reduction, you have to go for lower correlation or negative. Lower correlation or negative that will improve or maximize your risk diversification. All right. So I cannot get into like much details about this correlation about in investment decisions, but the basic idea is to maximize, to improve and maximize your risk diversification, risk reduction. You go for low correlation or negative. This correlation usually is between -1 and 1. So, okay. So the minimum correlation is -1. Maximum correlation is 1 there, right? So the low correlation means like 0.20, 0.10, 0.30, 0.10, or 0, or even negative, point minus 10, 0.10, minus 0.20. Now, in our case, is minus 8. Okay. Right. In our case is minus 0.23. So that's pretty good for risk diversification purpose. So what that means is this. Since this company, our company, it includes the Swiss franc and Argentine peso, two different foreign currencies with, that are negatively correlated. If you combine this two, the portfolio of this combined two of portfolio, that will enjoy pretty good risk diversification effect. Right? Let me show you. Let me prove that. Let me show you. Suppose this company include the 50% involve 50% of Swiss franc transactions and 50% of the Argentine peso cash flows. Then, if you combine those two, it should be like this: 0.50% times this one Swiss franc plus 0.50% times Argentine peso. So the portfolio that includes 50% of Swiss franc, 50% Argentine peso, their expected percentage change will be 4.76%. Okay? I mix 50%, 50%. So, and the resulting expected percentage change for this portfolio is 4.76%. So let's to save time, copy and paste there. This is the monthly percentage change of the portfolio, currency portfolio of Swiss franc and Argentine peso. Got it? All right. Now let's calculate average. Average of this portfolio, that is like 2.35%. And important part, standard deviation, let's calculate standard deviation is the series is this one here. If you calculate standard deviation, 3.16%. Look at this one. If you compare those two individual standard deviation, your portfolio standard deviation is quite smaller. You see that? Quite smaller. The 3.16% versus like individuals the Swiss franc 5.57%, Argentine peso 4.58%. This one is quite significantly lower. Now, what do you see there? The portfolio standard deviation risk measure is quite lower than individual when they combine these two together. And importantly, their correlation coefficient is negative. There is the major factor. There's the major factor that decrease their risk over risk portfolio risk this much. Okay, that's the story. Right? Okay, now since we calculated like our portfolio standard deviation, once we calculate the standard deviation, then we are ready to calculate this, the maximum Monday loss, right? Here, expected percentage change in the currency, we use this average, right? Suppose the average is the proxy for expected percentage change monthly average. So we use that one here. So that one, this one here. Maximum one-day loss, you calculate this way. I mean, just use this number, right? Expected percentage change for this one, yeah, the Swiss franc is 4.15, right? 4.15 minus 1.65 times standard deviation. The standard deviation. This, that's how you calculate. Okay? That's how you calculate. Right? Okay. That's how you calculate the maximum one-day loss for Swiss franc alone is minus 5.038. That's the kind of pessimistic worst case of scenario. Let's do the same thing for the Argentine peso. Again, this expected percentage change average, we use average minus 1.65 times standard deviation is this one here. So, okay, here, minus 6.994%. That is the maximum one-day loss for Argentine peso. So we calculated this percentage change. Now, let's calculate, maximum one-day loss for cash flow of $1 million. So, just change this percentage change to dollar. So $1 million for $1 million, the maximum one-day loss represent will be $50,377. That is the if you change this one percentage into like the dollar value, it is this one. It's quite a bit, very good for $1 million. So if you do the same thing, 1 million times 6.994, that is $69,935. That is the maximum one-day loss for cash flow of $1 million. Right? So it's quite significant. If you look at individual, but since we combine these two the foreign currencies with negative, negative correlation coefficient, let's see what happens. I said we could achieve risk diversification or risk reduction significantly, quite a lot, right? Compared to this. Now let's convert that one into the maximum one-day loss and then maximum one-day loss cash flows. All right. So maximum one-day loss is average is 2.35 minus 1.65 times 65 times standard deviation there. Where you see that? Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, 2.869. That's the maximum one-day loss in percentage. So it's quite significantly lower than this individual, right? It's because we combine these two with negative correlation, that portfolio of two currencies that we could achieve quite significant risk reduction because of this correlation, negative correlation. If you combine this one to like $1 million, it is $28,000. It's quite significantly lower than this individual first values maximum day loss. Okay, great. So that is how you calculate all this standard deviation, the portfolio standard deviation, especially this one. It's quite important, right? And then if you compare that one to the other one, you see quite significant or quite good like risk diversification effect. As a result, our resulting in the risk measure decreased quite a bit. Now, then the next one, I think we you see that we used it, we given this the model portfolio, the theory model. Now, we are given all this raw data. We calculated the percentage change, and we calculated standard deviation, and then we calculated, combine those one portfolio standard deviation. Suppose we are not given this raw data. We are asked to calculate this model, just this model. We are given like this one, weight 50-50%, and standard deviation of each one, like 5.57% and 4.58%, and correlation coefficient. Suppose we are given that one, not this one, raw data, then this one is the only way to calculate, right? So in that case, let's do this. Let me show you. Oops. Yeah, let me show you that. Here. Let's use this model to calculate it, to calculate the portfolio standard deviations. So let's do this one here. I'll just follow this one. Weight and standard deviation. Weight is 0.50, 50% squared times standard deviation of Swiss franc. It is here. It is here. That's squared plus 0.5 the Mexican peso times Mexican peso standard deviation is this one plus 2 times 0.50 times 0.50. So we want to times standard deviation is this one times standard deviation of the peso, and times finally correlation coefficient is this one, and close it. That is the inside the parenthesis. And then that's the variance. So we have to change the square root of it to calculate the standard deviation. 0.50. That's how you calculate standard deviation. Based on standard deviation, weights, and correlation coefficient. Now look at this one here. Right? We calculate this one. Let's change that to percentage and right. See, 3.16%. That is the standard deviation we calculated using this formula. Happen to be exactly the same thing as that one, right? See that? So they give you the same outcome, right? All right, next, economic exposure. This one is sensitivity of the company's cash flows to exchange rate movements. And often it is called operating exposure, and use why. So, for example, the cash flows and US dollar cash flows to foreign currency changes. Let's do this. If the foreign currency depreciates, then our dollar value appreciates, right? You know, 1%. So we're talking about the trading part, right? US versus UK, US versus Germany. So when UK or Germany like currency depreciates, that means the dollar value appreciates. So as you know, do you remember that? If the foreign currency, a country's currency depreciate, it will help their export, right? That will dollar value appreciation. That will hurt our export. So inflows that from the export that will decrease because there is more international competition, of course. And then since now this time cash outflow, dollar outflow, that is the payment for our import, right? Payment our import. Now, because the dollar value appreciate, our payment also decreases because the dollar value appreciate and foreign currency depreciate. So our less payment to import that that's will decrease our cash outflows. So we get decrease in outflows, inflows, and decrease in outflows. What is the net cash flows? It depends. It depends. For example, United States, we have a lot more import than export, right? A lot more import than export. Like that, the trade deficit is like $1 trillion, right? No, yeah, close. It's about one. A couple of years ago, it was like 800 billion dollar, $600 billion. Now it is over $1 trillion. So import is much higher. It is higher by like $1 trillion. So um, the outflows that decrease is more than this one here. So that means the payment is decreases. So it could be like in our case, in US case, could be a positive, probably a little bit positive. So that's the opposite, right? Foreign currency appreciation, that means the dollar value depreciation. So in this case, our this one foreign currency appreciation that will help dollar value depreciation that will help the U.S. export. So the cash inflows is increases, but because of dollar value depreciate, you have to pay more for import. So the cash outflows also increases, and that the balance, that the impact. For U.S. companies, cash flows for each cash flow source due to foreign currency changes. Okay, good. Now, if foreign currency depreciation, and this one is foreign currency depreciation. Now, foreign currency depreciation means the foreign export increases. All right, foreign export, increases. That means the U.S. firm's dollar cash flow will decrease when this happens. Foreign currency depreciation happens. The U.S. dollar value, the dollar cash flows will decrease, will decrease, will decrease, will decrease, no matter what. The source, whether the company is like focused on local sales or the company's the export denominated in dollars and the company's export denominated in foreign currencies, received from foreign investment. Whatever sources of their cash flows, it will decrease. Okay? Yes. And the opposite is increase. Right? Now, if the companies like imported supply denominated in dollars, if it's not the denominated in foreign currencies, that will not change the US dollar cash flows. No changes. It makes sense, right? If the companies imported supplies denominated in foreign currencies, of course that decreases. Is an interest owed in foreign borrowed, of course that decreases. And the opposite here, when there's foreign currency appreciation. All right, that's the thing. So this is kind of theoretical, kind of scenario, sensitivity scenario analysis there, right? For two different cases and for different sources of U.S. companies' dollar cash flows, right? Now let's do direct analysis about the exchange rate on our companies like cash flows, right? Operating cash flows. All right. Now, our company has businesses in US and Canada, but the sales majority of sales will be sold in US. And there's a like 4 million Canadian dollar will be sold in Canada. So basically, it's like majority of the operation. As however, the cost of material, majority of materials are imported from Canada. Canada. So we have here, right? Operating expenses. This basic businesses is already done domestically in the United States, but they import their raw materials from here and they complete their product, and then part of it, just 4 million Canadian dollar, is exported to Canada, but majority of is sold in US. Okay, it's not quite like multinational corporations like IBM or Coca-Cola or Procter and Gamble. It's like primary in US, but part of it will be sold to Canada. But the thing is, the cost material, raw materials will be majority of raw materials will be imported from Canada. Still, multinational corporation. All right. Given this like basic data, let's talk about the exchange rate. Different exchange rate scenarios, how those different exchange rate scenarios affect our operating cash flows. Okay, let's do that. First, let's calculate sales. Sales and sales is like sales is given $320 million. The Canadian sales is, you're given 4 million Canadian dollars, right? So we have to convert that 0.75 to US dollar times 4 million. This is 3 million. Under that one, 0.80 times 4 million. So 3 million 3.2 million. This one is 4 million times 0.85 times 4 million. That is this place. This one here. Okay. So total sales is sum of those. 2, that one plus 10 Canadian sales. So let's do copy and paste there. See that? Depending on for the same sales, same the projection, because of the exchange rate for Canadian dollar, our sales revenue is changes there, right? So this $200,000, this $400,000 change. All right. Now let's talk about the cost of materials, the operating expenses. Cost of materials, like cost of materials is $50 million, and then a Canadian materials that we use is 200 million Canadian dollars. Now, depending on the exchange rate, it's has different impact on US dollar. So how much? 200 million times the exchange rate is 0.75, right? And this one is 200 million Canadian dollar, 0.80 is there, is, and 200 million Canadian dollar times 0.85. 85, yeah. Operating expenses is given like $60 million. Okay. And the total material and operating expenses in US dollar will be sum of this. And just copy this. Okay, this. So for the same like aspect, so same like cost of materials and exchange bring expenses, our like US dollar expenses will be different just because of this different exchange rate. All right. Okay. Now we calculate this one here. Now let's calculate the financial costs. Interest expenses. The U.S. interest expenses are $3 million in Canadian dollar in Canada. Looks like the company they finance some of 10 million Canadian dollar in Canada. So I mean I know it 10 more than that. The like interest expenses is about 10 million Canadian dollars. So let's convert that into US dollar. So 10 million times 0.75, that is US dollar. And then this one is 0.80 times 10 million. So this one is 10 million times 0.85 here. So we calculate total interest expenses is this one plus this one here. So it's just copy and paste. All right. So what we did was we calculated that sales revenue. We calculated the cost of materials and operating expenses there. And then we calculated your total interest expenses. Now, the cash flows, operating cash flows is sales revenue minus this total materials and operating expenses minus and total interest expenses. That is $52.50 million in the first case. Let's copy that. Yeah, same thing, right? So in the same case is like this sales revenue minus this the cost of material and operating expenses and interest expenses. We have $42.2 million. And in the third case, we get the operating cash flow is $31.50. I'm not $31.9 million. Look at this. Look at this. For the same businesses, for the same transactions, for the same structure, just because of different exchange rate, the exchange rate possibilities scenarios, we have like $20 million differences. The first two is like 10 million, about 10.1 million. The second is like about $10 million. But this one and this one is close to 20 million, over 20 million dollar difference in operating cash flows. Right? That's another reason multinational corporations they have a great deal of the attention to their exchange rate risk management. Okay, the last one is this one, translational exposure. Translational exposure is exposure of multinational corporations consolidated financial statement to exchange rate fluctuation. Multinational corporations they have to calculate consolidate financial statement and they report it to SEC. So in this case, and the shareholders now, because of exchange rate fluctuation, the different exchange rate volatility, that one has significant impact on sometimes on financial statements, right? Financial statement. So two important determinant of this translation exposure is proportion of businesses by foreign subsidiaries. if they have like foreign subsidiaries, like it's over 50%, over 70%, 80%, that will have significant, much higher and higher translational exposure. And of course also locations of foreign subsidiaries, like multiple countries currencies, they may have different different volatility. Their exchange rate has different volatility. If they have higher, they have more locations in the countries with higher volatility, their translational exposure probably will be higher. Okay, so all those two are like determinants of translational exposure. All right, this is like accounting procedure, accounting method affected by accounting procedures, many of which are based on financial accounting standard and standard boards. Okay, so I think you remember this from FASB 52. We look at this here. London, can you go through these five?
Yes.
Right. This one.
Accounting methods affected by accounting procedures, many of which are based on FASB 52. The functional currency of an entity is the currency of the economic environment in which the entity operates. The current exchange rate of reporting date is used to translate the assets and liabilities of a foreign entity from its functional currency to its reporting currency. The weighted average exchange rate over the relevant period is used to translate revenue, expenses, and gains and losses of a foreign entity from its functional currency into US dollars. Translated income, gains, or losses due to changes in foreign currency values are not recognized in current net income, but are reported as a second component of stockholders' equity. An exception to this rule is a foreign entity located in a country with high inflation. And realized income, gains, or losses due to foreign currency transactions are recorded in current net income, although there are some exceptions.
Here. Now, these are some important, like, accounting procedures based on like French accounting, FASB 52, and there are some others too, right? So this is typical like procedure. I don't want to get into that. So exposure of an MNC's stock price to translational effect. Now, because of this translation exposure, the company's stock price, the valuation of stock price also is impacted there. So, for example, MNC's translation exposure affect its consolidated earnings. If the consolidated earnings changes, then its valuation will be also changes, right? So, and this valuation of this one will affect like stock prices, of course, and stock prices based on their managerial compensation in many cases. So that happens. So one example that happens is, for example, if the company's like earnings is the company's like the foreign subsidiaries earnings is like 10 million British pound, 10 million British pound, and the exchange rate is let's analyze this for these two possibilities. Exchange rate $1.70. Then the consolidated earnings like 10 million. Let's change that one to US dollars. 1.7 times 10 million. 10 million, yeah. Right? So 17 million dollars. This is dollars. And then this one is 1.5 times 10 million here. That's US dollars, right? Okay, now EPS, earnings per share, that's suppose the company's like your total number of shares is 10 million, and just simply divide this total consolidated earnings by 10 million. Then you get 1.7 that happen to be like earnings per share happen to be 1.7, right? And then the same thing for the second case, 1.5, right? 1.5. And suppose the company's like P ratio is 20, given P ratio, right? Projected P ratio and projected earnings per share. Now PE ratio is this. PE ratio is stock price. P ratio is stock price divided by the earnings per share, right? Then, if you want to calculate, you do that. If you want to calculate price, it's equal to PE ratio times earnings per share. That's it, right? That's it. So, this is just simplified, like an approach for relative valuation. So let's just stick to that. Then price is P ratio. So this is PE ratio. So relative valuation, based on relative valuation, the expected price, intrinsic value is this. P ratio is 20 times the earnings per share is $1.70. That is like $34, right? Now, on the second scenario, it is the P ratio is 20 times, the EPS is $1.50. Look at this. It's quite different, right? This one, the first case is $34 and second case is $30. Now, as I said, like manager compensation is based on the $34, like the valuation is the value here. So that one could make difference in the manager compensation and other decisions there, right? So I think this is it. So I covered that one, covered this chapter.